A few videos back, I offered a 3-step practice for self-compassion. And I want to bring you through those 3 steps again, but with more depth this time. So, in order to do that, I got to remind you about the background track. The background track is your inner commentator. It's the part of you that has a lot of opinions. So, you're doing the thing, whatever it might be, and there's usually some sort of background commentary that's assessing how you're doing it. Sometimes that commentary is friendly. It's saying, you're doing a great job, keep it up. But more often, it can be sort of mean-spirited. And that tone makes all the difference. So one of the things that we're doing with self-compassion is noticing the tone of that background track and then seeing if we can bring in a little more friendliness. But we can take it another step. We can not just change the tone, we can also change the message. So sometimes that tone is coming from a part of us that's actually being protective, that's afraid, that's a little uncertain about what we're doing. And so sometimes judgment is a really effective way to just shut us down. So let me offer a personal example to illuminate this background track conversation. A couple of days ago, I sat down to write my weekly newsletter and just couldn't get going. The page was blank, so I looked through all the tabs on my computer. I tried again, page was still blank, so I sorted laundry. Eventually, I actually cleaned out my refrigerator, which looks fantastic right now. But obviously, I was having a real problem with this, and I couldn't figure out why. All I knew is that I was sort of beating myself up in the background around not being able to do it and about being so distractible. So finally, I remembered the 3 steps. Imagine that. I sat down in a sort of more meditative place and asked myself what's actually going on. So, first step, noticing. I started to actually notice that background track. And I noticed that the background track was not exactly concerned about it being a blank page. The distraction was a part of me trying to avoid writing. And then when I settled into the why are you avoiding writing, what came in was what you have to say is too simplistic and too obvious. And in settling into that messaging, I realized that it was a younger part of myself who often gets afraid that I will appear stupid, who says things to me like, everybody already knows this. There's no need to talk about it. So as I settled into that part, I was able to move into that second step, which is curiosity, right? What is this actually about? It's not just about distraction. It's about this part that's feeling vulnerable. And once I understood that, then I could move to self-friendliness with more ease because it's hard to be friendly when we are still actually judging ourselves. So if we can change not just the tone, but the actual message, in kind of sitting with that part of myself, I was able to understand why it was feeling afraid and give it some kindness, some soothing. I could say to it, I'm so sorry that you're feeling that way, but actually, I think that we have something of value to say. And then came in the more typical self-compassion practice where I could just offer some self-tenderness, some self-friendliness. But I had to move through a deeper understanding of what that kind of judgy tone was all about before I could really authentically bring in that friendliness. So let's practice that together. You can begin your meditation just by coming into a comfortable shape. And once you arrive, notice the places in your body that are in contact with support. Just let yourself drop into that support a little more fully. And focus on a long exhale. And as you exhale, let go of any tension that is possible to let go of. I know that can be a tall order, but just feel that sense of release as you exhale. And notice if some of the bracing or the tension that we all tend to hold can relax a little bit. And then come to the noticing step. So if there's a stressor that you've been sitting with, you can bring that to mind. You can also just notice in this moment what's happening. Sensations, thoughts, emotions, images, just generally what's present in your body and your mind right now. And if you're working with a particular stressor, just bring it to mind and notice what comes up around it. Sometimes what comes up are thoughts, sometimes physical sensations. If it's anxiety producing, you might feel that anxiety in your body. Just notice what arises. And given what you're noticing, see if you can bring in a little curiosity. You don't have to solve a problem. You're just curious about the thoughts and the sensations and the emotions that arise in relationship to what you're sitting with. And you're noticing the background track, the commentary about what you're sitting with, the commentary about the sensations in your body, or the emotions or the thoughts that are coming up. And if some of those things are judgmental or uncomfortable in some way, you might just say, "Tell me more about that." Again, you're gathering information. You're not trying to solve a problem. Just get curious about what's difficult. And if there's a particularly judgy voice going on, you might ask, "Tell me more about that." That part that's speaking might be feeling uncomfortable or scared. Is that voice in some way protecting you? Just be curious about those questions for a moment. And is there some way you could soothe that part? What would you say to a friend that was having those same concerns or fears? Would you say something like, "I get that this is hard. You can do it." Whatever it might be, see if you can bring in a friendliness, the same kind of friendliness you would bring in if you were talking to a friend. Take just a little bit more time with this. If there's a particular sentence that's coming to mind that feels good to hear, like "you've got this" or "it will be okay," you might just repeat that sentence a few more times and see if you can really feel it inside. See if you can really feel soothed by it. And as you take these next few breaths, just take a moment to move yourself through that process. and notice what stood out, what you noticed, what information came through curiosity, and whether you're feeling any additional self-friendliness in this moment. So again, you didn't just change the tone, you worked to change the message moving from you can't, or you're not enough, or you're not doing it right, to something a little more supportive, a little friendlier. And when we do that, we don't just up our self-compassion, but we soothe our nervous system. This practice of compassion turns on that parasympathetic or rest and digest response and dials down that fight, flight, or sympathetic response. So what we're learning together is that while, again, we begin with nervous system regulation, there are all of these pillars in this framework that help build and build our capacity for all the things that we want more of in life. If you'd like to move through more somatic healing practices and nervous system regulation tools with me, you can join the waitlist for my somatic immersion.